So this was a few months ago, and quarantine was already in place. So I spent a lot of time at home and around home than usual. There's a park very close to my house, so one day I decided to go for a little jog. I ran from my house into the park, and since I don't have a lot of cardio, I decided to take a little break. I noticed that a guy was looking my way, but I didn't think anything of it until I started jogging again, and he started walking at the same time. Since I was jogging, I eventually lost him, so I thought it was over. Boy, was I wrong. It's now many hours later, and I'm sleeping, and through the window, I notice car lights coming back and forth on my street. The window in my room gives me a view of my street. Now, some may think it's normal, but I live in a very quiet neighborhood, so I wanted to see what was going on. As I thought, there was a car that was traveling back and forth on my street. Then, the car stops right in front of my house, and the same guy comes out of the passenger seat, which means there is at least one other person with him. Until that point, I was still half awake, but the sight of that same guy looking up to my window, seeing me and smiling, woke me the fuck up real quick. I immediately closed the blinds, which were a tiny bit see-through by the way, climbed in my bed, phone in hand. After a few minutes, I fell asleep, only to be woken up by light tapping on my window. Remember when I said that my blinds are see-through? Well, I could make out the silhouette of a man, probably the same guy since there were still car lights on the streets, and he was crouched at my window, tapping from outside. The first thing that came to my mind is not to move and try to pretend that I'm still asleep, not knowing if he could see inside my room or not. And then I remembered that my room is on the second floor. How the hell did he climb onto the little roof area outside my window? Absolutely no idea, but I know that going down is not easy. I slowly pulled the covers over my head and called the police, whispering and telling them that the guy was still tapping. They told me to slowly get out of reach of the window in case he breaks in or something, and that they would be there in about 5 minutes. I crawled out of bed and into the bathroom, where I could see the street behind my house, and waited. After a couple minutes, I heard the knocking stop, then silence, and then a big thump. Then more silence, and a knocking at my door downstairs. I was still on the phone with the operator when I heard someone call out that it was the police and the guy was gone. I told the operator that police had arrived, and they told me, wait. There was silence, and she said that police was not yet arrived, and to not open the door under any circumstances. Soon enough, she tells me police is now there, and that I can go open the door. I go check outside of my bedroom window, out of paranoia, and there were in fact 3 police cars and about 5 or 6 officers outside my house. I go downstairs as one of them is knocking, and I open the door, thank the operator, and hang up. I tell them the whole thing, and they tell me that the guy was already gone when they arrive, that there was no one there anymore. In the next few days, I saw officers on my street, but I never got news from the guys. The only thing they found was a rope and a small knife. No fingerprints, no guy, no car, nothing. When I was around 9 years old, my friend, an immediate neighbour, and I were playing basketball in my front yard, when I noticed a small, whitish grey car parked across the street, in such a position that its windshield was facing our house. In said car was a middle-aged man, clearly pointing a camera at us. I stared for a while and squinted, because I was trying to see if he was actually photographing us, or maybe just reviewing photos of the camera while holding it oddly. After watching for a while, it was obvious that he was pressing the clicker, photographing us. My friend and I immediately went inside, decided, for some reason, not to tell my mother, and went up to my room. Anywhere from half an hour to an hour later, my mum asked my friend and I if we could deliver a box of cookies to my other neighbour. We agreed, and, as for me at least, I'd forgotten entirely about the prior incident. I guess because I was 9 and I was having fun with my friend. We walked up the stairs to the woman's house with the cookies and rang the doorbell, but she wasn't home. When we turned around, there was the man in his car. He had parked along the curb right at the entrance of the stairway leading up to the woman's house, so that we couldn't walk down the stairs and up the sidewalk without coming in direct contact with his car. I still remember the absolute feeling of panic that filled me, and we immediately began banging on the woman's door and frantically ringing the doorbell, to no avail. The man rolled down his passenger window side of the window and began talking to us. "Clara, my friend, it's me, Harry." I looked at my friend and could tell that she didn't really recognize him, but the fact that he was claiming to be somebody she knew, talking to us and not immediately pursuing us, made me calm down a little. He proceeded to say that he had lived in the house across the street from her and had a daughter her age that she used to play with when she was a baby. Interesting enough, Clara said that there was, in fact, a family who lived there who had a young girl she played with, so that checked out. She said that she couldn't recognise the man, though given the fact that she was 5 when they moved and 3 when they used to have contact, it's not likely that she would have recognised him, even if he was who he said. He proceeded to say that he was photographing us to show his daughter, who missed her, and said he was going to record us. He took out the camera and began recording us in a very interview-like fashion, saying, "Hi, what's your name? What do you like to do for fun?" I know for a fact that I told him where I lived in this interaction, though I can't remember if he asked me that directly or if I volunteered it. I think the elation I felt over the fact that he didn't immediately kidnap us made me way too open with him. He videoed us for about 30 minutes or an hour. Then he drove away. The story honestly gets more disturbing to me the older I get. There was no way this man, the self-proclaimed old neighbour to my friend, was videoing us because his daughter was nostalgic for a friend she had when she was 3. Why was he back in the neighbourhood? Where was his family? There was no reason to wait outside our houses for hours, just to film us after already photographing us without our consent. It makes me sick to think about what was done with those photos. Who is this man who knows all the young girls in the neighbourhood, past and present? And what did he do with those photos and videos? This was several years ago now when I was in college, and I was headed back to my apartment late one night after being out with friends. As I went to make a left turn into the complex, I checked to see if anyone was behind me, and since no one was in front of me or behind me, I opted not to worry about using a turn signal. I parked outside the building, and as I was crossing the street to get to my apartment, a car was driving towards me. I wondered where it had come from, since I was sure no one was near me. But I was only 18, very sheltered and naive, and instead of being cautious or fearful, I instead wanted to be helpful. The car stopped approximately 16 feet or so away from me, as I was right in the middle of the street, and a man got out and asked, "Do you live here?" I thought maybe he needed directions, and I told him that yes, I did live here. As he asked about this, he was walking towards me, and as soon as I answered, he lunged at me, grabbed a handful of my hair in his right hand, and grabbed my throat with his left hand. Started dragging me to his car as he growled that he ought to cut my fucking neck. To say I was in shock was an understatement. His car was running with the door open, and it wasn't until I was at his car door before my brain literally used my name and said, "Caitlin, scream!" Once I finally started screaming, he pushed me away while he jumped in his car and took off, and I ran to my apartment. I was shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock, and once I was inside, I realised my boyfriend was there because he'd come by earlier in the night to surprise me. But since I wasn't home, he'd gone to bed. Of course, I was still freaking out. Instead of him being concerned, he acted like an ass because he was upset I was coming in so late, so I didn't even call the police. Once I told my mom the next day, she insisted I call them, but of course, nothing ever came of it. I often wondered what the guy thought I did that I deserved to have my fucking neck cut. I'm sure it wasn't because I didn't see a turn signal, so I even wonder where he came from. I never wanted to meet him again, and I always hoped no one else did either. Many years ago, my best friend and I rented our first place together. It was completely furnished, including dishes, sheets, etc., which worked for us since we didn't have any furniture. An older lady showed us the home, but she said her son was the owner, and he lived a few hours away by the coast. It was a 3-bedroom, but she said 1 bedroom was used for storage, so it stayed locked. Since we only needed 2 bedrooms, that was fine, but it was still a little unsettling wondering what was in the locked room. Also, it was like the previous owners had just picked up and left. There were still items in the nightstands. There was even a stack of Playboy and Penthouse magazines in my closet. The home seemed to be built on a slab, but the kitchen had a small step up, and it was a wooden floor which was prone to creaking when you walked on it. On occasion, I thought I heard footsteps walking across it when I was the only one home, but I just dismissed it because I didn't want to freak out myself or my roommate. One night, we had a group of friends over, and one of them, Dee, started prompting us to hush. We all got quiet, and you could distinctly hear what sounded like footsteps walking across the kitchen floor. And Dee proclaimed, "It sounds like footsteps walking across your kitchen." My best friend and I both exclaimed, "You hear it too?" We then realised we had both heard it, but didn't want to mention it to the other. So that was eye-opening to have it confirmed. The next creepy thing happened one night as I was about to go to bed. My boyfriend at the time worked a second shift, so he would occasionally drop by on his way home from work. I usually knew when he was coming, and I wasn't expecting him. I clearly heard the doorbell ring. The home was an older home, probably built in the late 40s, and it had one of those old, really loud buzzer-style doorbells. You would definitely not mistake the sound for anything else. Of course, I thought it was him, so I immediately go to the door, but no one was there, and there were no car lights leaving. The street was straight, going in both directions for a ways, so I would have definitely seen a car leaving. There was no question in my mind that the doorbell had rung, so the hair was now standing up on the back of my neck. There's nothing worse than feeling alone in that situation, so I went to wake up my roommate, but no matter what I did, how hard I shook her, or how loud I called her name, she would not wake up. She had never been difficult to wake up, so this freaked me out even more. After trying to wake her for at least 15 minutes, I just had to go back to my bed, pull the covers over my head like a child, and try to fall asleep. I talked to my boyfriend, and he said he had not dropped by, so that was unnerving to say the least. The last experience was definitely the strangest though. In the hallway, there were 3 heavy objects attached to the wall that were like antique farm or outdoor equipment. I can't quite remember what 2 of them were, but they were all really heavy and made of wood. And the one I remember was like a rake, but completely made of wood. Again, they were heavy. One day I was in the shower and I heard a loud noise. The next thing I know, my roommate has come in and is beyond freaked out. She tells me I have to hurry out to see what the noise was, so I quickly get out to see that all 3 of those heavy items had all fallen on the floor at the same time. There was no reasonable explanation for it to have happened. We were in a lease, so we couldn't just move out, but shortly thereafter, the owner decided he was going to put the home on the market. He ended up being a huge pain. Although we'd never met him, he came to the house and just my roommate was home. Being young and naive, she felt obliged to let him in, although he had clearly been drinking. It left her very uncomfortable, and then he showed up at my work. Soon after, he sued us saying we had ruined the carpet. We had only lived there for about 6 months, and the carpet was the same as when we moved in. We had to hire a lawyer, and we won the case. The whole thing was bizarre. I didn't mention yet that there was a small addition on the back of the house. It was also on a concrete slab, right off of the step up the kitchen, and made me wonder if he had added it there, and if there was an ulterior reason why. The whole situation was creepy, including the landlord, and it made me wonder if he or something he had done caused the activity in the house. A couple of weeks back, I was driving home around 10 pm and I pulled up to a set of lights a few blocks from my place. I have a four-wheel drive and had the passenger seats down with my surfboard lying on it, so my partner was sitting behind my seat in the back. My partner said to me that the driver of the car to my left was trying to get my attention, so I put down the passenger window and a guy said to me, "Your phone is on your roof." I was very confused because I knew my phone had been dead for about 3 hours and was sitting in my handbag next to me. The guy says again, "Your phone, it's on your roof. You should pull over up and get it off." I asked my partner where his phone was, and he held it up so I could see it in the rear vision mirror. I looked at the guy again and he said, "Pull over up and get your phone off your roof." So I then put down the window behind the passenger seats in the back, and my partner leaned across and goes, "Hey mate, what's up?" The guy was clearly taken aback, as he thought I was alone until this point. He quickly turned left and sped off. I was pretty freaked out at this, so we drove around for a little while, just to make sure no one was following us. When we got home, we looked on the roof. Of course, there was no phone on there. Nothing was. I'm not sure what exactly the guy's intentions were, but thankfully, he didn't succeed. I had met up with a friend to attend an event. It was in a boardroom of a theatre. It was right in the heart of the city, so I'd looked forward to being in the area. My friend and I stayed together and hung out for a while after the event in a nearby cafe that was still open. My friend was a bit drunk, but sober enough to walk and be reasonable. She kept looking around her for some reason, like she was looking for someone. It was okay at first, but she grew more and more paranoid. As I went to pay for our food and drinks, a strange guy approached me rather ceremoniously and said, "A pretty girl like you shouldn't be out this late." He had this creepy smile and cold eyes. There was barely anyone there. I made a sudden eye contact with the cashier, and she just gave me a stern and firm no by nodding several times. My heart started racing as this made me very uncomfortable. I pretty much bolted out of there. My friend and I went to the parking garage so we could get into my car and get the heck out of there. As we got into my car, it was just dark and eerily quiet, and I had a bad feeling. As I was about to exit the parking garage, a car comes speeding at me, as it was intentionally trying to T-bone my vehicle. I somehow managed to make a sharp turn left, get back into the garage, and find one of the security officers on level 4. Pretty much yelled at him to call the police as soon as possible. We were both unharmed, and yet, the driver of the vehicle was the same creepy guy trying to make small talk with me a few minutes earlier. Four, 10, 21. I work part-time at a grocery store, and I usually work the closing shift. About 30 minutes to close, a lady comes to my register. She's polite, friendly, and seemed very normal. She pays for her groceries, I hand her the receipts, she leaves. Seemed normal to me. About 10 minutes after we close, I'm headed out to my bike, but she stopped before me I leave the store, claiming that she had left her phone inside and that she needed to get it. She hadn't left her phone. It would have been at my register, and I had thoroughly cleaned it, as well as its surrounding area before I clocked out. But I offered to go in and check anyway, because maybe it had been dropped on the floor. I wanted to go home, and luckily my manager offered to call her phone, so I headed to my bike to get going. The moment I take the lock off my bike, she drives over to me, making small talk. It's a bit weird, seeing as I'm clearly trying to get home and she doesn't know me at all. She tells me that I have a cool bike, asking me where I got it. I explain to her that it's electric and that I just got it from Amazon. She tells me that she didn't know they made electric bikes, but then tells me a few minutes later how she's been looking to get an electric bike for a while now. She asked to take a picture of my bike, and then suddenly asked me why I was still wearing a mask, going on how about it could give me a sinus problem. I decided not to take it off, since she's taking a photo, which I noticed the camera is aimed more so at me than my bike, even though I stepped away so that she could get a better view of the bike itself. Unknown to me, my manager and another worker were watching this whole interaction. And after this woman left, went over to me and asked if I was okay. I didn't really think much of it, telling them that it was fine and that all she wanted to know about was my bike. I headed home, but on my way, I thought a bit more about the interaction. She came back to the store claiming to have lost her phone, but had it on her the whole time. She took a picture with it. She kept repeating my name in our conversation as often as she could, almost like she was trying to memorize it. She took a photo of me as well as my mode of transportation, all while trying to get me to take my mask off right before taking it, as if to be able to see my entire face. Sort of creepy. Even weirder was when I turned back to the store to see if she was still there, when I saw a police car, which, after leaving the parking lot, turned on its sirens and sped off in the direction of the lady that left in. Maybe I'm overthinking, but this interaction just seemed really strange. Anyway, let me know if you think I'm overthinking things, or if you'd be creeped out too. Edit. Thank you for all the replies. I figured I should add in more general info so you can get a better idea of the situation. I'm a college-aged male and live in a safe area. I had never seen that woman before that night. My co-workers hadn't ever seen her before either. Update 4/12/21. I was called in earlier asking if I'd be available to close tonight. I'll let everyone know if I see her again. Update 4/12/21. Worked a couple hours tonight and closed. No sign of that woman, and nobody saw her last night either. There was a man who came in around the same time she had, 9:30, but was hanging around the store until I left, around 10:10. He was standing there at the front, and then went over to his bike after myself and the other employees left the store. I got on my bike and made eye contact with him before leaving. He left a little bit after I did, but as far as I could see, he wasn't following me. Well, some important information for this tale. For any history fanatics out there, I live in an old as shit fishing town in East England, notorious for being haunted. Nearly every alley has a story, and a popular place for ghost hunters. Obviously, this is a real story that happened. This information just makes it a little creepier walking at night. Also, this was about 3 years ago. I was working at a big retail store in the UK. I was a night shelf stacker basically. Deliveries would usually come in about 8 p.m, and I would work until around 2 a.m, putting it away, logging on the system, blah blah. Anyway, some nights the deliveries would turn up later, and I would work later. Good money. I had no priorities, whatever. The night this happened, the delivery turned up late, at 10 p.m. This was a ball ache for a lot of us, since we knew we would be leaving later than usual, but the general consensus was again, good money, whatever. So we didn't end up finishing up until about 3:30 or 4 a.m, sometime around there. I usually biked home, so this was no trouble. Finished up with the other guys, and I had a cigarette as the various people left in cars and their own bikes, which was usually the case. I then proceeded to hop on my bike and start on the journey home. I got maybe 20 feet before I realized my tire was flat. Great. I thought what should be a 10-minute bike ride would now turn into a 30-minute walk in pitch black streets. The streetlights turn off at midnight here, except for main roads. So off I went, walking with my bike, and the first 20 minutes of the journey went fine. Then I started feeling strange. It was rare I feel superstitious, but something just sat wrong all of a sudden. I was walking on a main road, lights on, and went past the town's college. It was two empty, medium-sized car parks outside and a large bike shed, but always had a light inside for some reason. My home was literally around the corner from the college, so I tried to shrug off the feeling as I was almost home, but there was definitely more checks over the shoulder. I strolled past, bike in hand, when I heard something weird. Whistling. It was slow, and it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand. I came to a realization after my friend showed me the Reddit comment called The Whistler, that it was the exact whistle in the video he uploaded. So this just makes it weirder for me now. I immediately spun my head towards the source, the bike shed, and what I saw was a girl. She must have been a teenager. Her head was poking up from a wall next to the bike shed, about 100 feet from me. Her hair was dark because she was silhouetted by the light of the bike shelter, and her eyes were dark. As soon as I saw her, she darted down as if hiding. Bear in mind, I had seen no one else this night. Not many people wander around at 4 a.m. in winter in a small town. I felt creeped the fuck out immediately and started to walk a lot faster with my bike towards home. As I kept peering back and walking, I saw her pop her head up once more and dart back. As I got out of view of the college, I turned into my pitch black road. There was a single lit street lamp that could be seen behind me on the main street, and I saw something even weirder. It looked like an older man, 50s or 60s, standing slightly to the side of the street lamp, as if he was trying to stay out of sight. He was standing with something in between both of his hands, like a piece of string or wire or something, and he was turning it with his palms, while smiling at me. He didn't move at all, just stood there. I couldn't take the weirdness anymore and just broke off into a sprint with my bike. I ran down my alley that led me into my back gate. My heart was racing as I bolted the gate behind me. I sat for a moment and listened for any sound of being followed. For a good 2 minutes it was silent. The air was weirdly still for a winter night. Then I heard that fucking whistling again. It sounded like it was at the bottom of my alleyway. I lived about halfway up the road, so it was quite a way away. I just slowly walked to my back door with as little noise as possible, just in case whoever it was listening out for which house I'd gone into. I don't know, it tired me as extra cautious, I guess. I have no idea what those two people were doing out at that time. My brain was racked, all sorts of possibilities when I think of it. Was she hiding from the man? She looked about early teens maybe. Or did they know each other? I don't know. I just can't help feeling I was caught in the middle of something. This happened about a month ago. I work half-night shifts in a UK chain where I generally finish around 2 a.m. It was a still Friday night. Living in a coastal town, these are somewhat rare to come by this time of year. No single gust of wind, not a cloud in the sky. I finished my last cigarette before the peaceful moonlit bicycle home. Or so I thought. Now I should note that I have had many issues biking home at night before, so I had known from previous experience to just stick to the main roads where the streetlights remain illuminated, guiding me home through a troubled town. So that's what I did. Kept to the main road and then followed it up to a steep incline that passes by a large park known and loved to the town. When I say park, I mean a fenced off big fuck off field type bastard with a children's play area, slides, swings and shit, and a little car park. The park is completely dark as usual, but the only exception is a pair of car headlights that are clearly parked at the child's play area. Must have been at least 200 meters away from me, biking on the lit road that runs past it. Flipping big park. The road is quite steep, and I'm putting the deltoids and the glutes and the flutes to good work, pushing up this big bugger, when I start hearing a shouting towards me, coming from the car. It's far away, so it sounds like unintelligible hooting and grunting. One clearly was a bloke, and another clearly a woman by the pitch of their voices. I think nothing of it, as they are clearly not cries for help, more just likely just a couple of crazy kids up to no good, making mischief. I ignored them and carry on pushing up the road. I got a bit concerned when I hear the slamming of their car doors and a roar of the engine as they speedily tear through the field to make its way up the road to me, the unsuspecting cyclist. I push it harder, just past 3/4 of the way up this road, almost at the top. I hear them exit the park and start making their way up the road, hollering, shouting, laughing and revving the engine. It was like some Planet of the Apes shit. As I got to the top, they were nearly right behind me, and I quickly turned onto a pedestrian path. They razzed past, no indication of slowing down, no indication at all for that matter, as they pulled onto a large roundabout at the top of the road. Bloody savages. They were shouting all sorts of nonsense, but the one thing I did make out was, where the fuck did he go? After I'd turned down the alley and turned my bike lights off. They ended up looping around trying to find me for a few minutes, before zooming off, and I promptly made my way home. A couple of days later, I heard that a fire engine had been called to that park about an hour after the incident, as the child's play area was ablaze, and they caused thousands of pounds worth of damage to the children's play equipment. Makes me wonder if they were chasing me down thinking I witnessed their vandalism. Would they have tried to hit me off my bike, as they are clearly demented enough to burn down a kid's play area? I reported what I saw to the police, and heard nothing back. I stick to the darker roads now just in case I ever bump into those rascals once more.